everyone, my name is Sanah, and I want to speak on the title Who Am I? If Not What I Do? Have you ever felt a little invisible in a room full of people? Not because no one looked at you, but because they only saw what you do, not who you are. In a lot of Indian households, and honestly, even outside them, people are often reduced to their function. A mother becomes just a mother. A son becomes an engineer, a grandparent becomes retired. Their identities slowly flatten into their roles, responsibilities, or titles. It's something I noticed growing up too. I remember once, during a family gathering, I asked my aunt, "Did you like the book that was lying on the table?" She just laughed and said, "Liking books isn't in my job description anymore." Everyone laughed, but something about that stayed with me. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't meant to be sad. It just felt telling. That quiet moment, that subtle resignation, is what made me start asking, who were these people before they became someone else's someone? Do they remember? And this gentle but persistent chipping away at your personal identity, that's the kind of identity crisis we need to talk about. Let's begin by understanding what we're really talking about here. In many cultures, like ours, the concept of the individual often takes a backseat to the collective. Our society is built around family, community, social contribution. You're valued for your role, but not necessarily yourself. That's why introductions often sound like, "Oh, I'm her daughter, my brother's an IIT," or just, "He's retired from the army." This isn't wrong. It gives people a sense of belonging, even pride. But it becomes a problem when the role becomes the only thing left, when the person beneath it slowly fades into the background. Take this for example. A homemaker, she's managed a home for decades, might just say, "I'm just a housewife." She doesn't say, "I'm good at managing people," or "I'm an amazing problem solver," even though she's probably both. But somewhere along the way, her role became her whole identity. Or a college student gets asked 50 times a week, "What are you planning to do after graduation?" Never once, "What excites you these days?" It's subtle, but these messages they pile up, and research backs this up. People who don't have a strong sense of who don't have a strong sense of self outside of their external roles, whether it be work, family, social image, often face anxiety and identity confusion, particularly during transitions. You get married, your kids move out, you retire, any big life change. And over time, irrespective of your job, income, role, you start living for these roles and not through ourselves. But let's be fair, there's another side to this as well. Some might say, "But aren't these roles meaningful? Isn't there beauty in being a mother, a teacher, a provider? Isn't that also a part of who you are?" And yes, that's true. Roles give us purpose, they give us pride. A lot of people find meaning in being there for others, contributing to something larger. And especially in collectivist cultures like ours, selflessness, it's often considered a virtue. It's not just being productive, it's being useful. For instance, an elderly man just spends every morning volunteering at the community park, might say, "I'm just a retired school teacher," even though he's shaping young minds in his neighborhoods. And that's beautiful. He sees his role as his legacy. But here's where it becomes tricky. When that role becomes the only acceptable identity. When someone feels they can no longer explore what makes them happy. When joy and self expression feel like luxuries. When we stop asking people who they are and only focus on what they do for us. And that quiet erasure, it adds up. It's not dramatic, but it is real. So, let's pause for a second. Step back. I want to ask you something. If you were stripped of your job title, your college name, your education, your relationships, if let's just take all those labels away, what would you be? Would you still recognize yourself? Most of us live life assuming that the next role will complete us, that next exam result, that job, that relationship, that social media label. But we don't often stop and ask ourselves, who is the person who is carrying all this expectation? I've caught myself doing this too. When someone says, "Tell me about yourself," my first instinct is to talk about my work, my education, things I've done. I almost never say, "I'm thoughtful, I'm a cheerful person, I'm someone who notices small things." We are so used to narrating our output, we forget to acknowledge our being. That identity crisis doesn't start when people stop caring about us. It starts when we stop caring about ourselves, when we stop being curious about ourselves. So, ask yourself, when was the last time you introduced yourself without your titles, your grades, your resume? When was the last time someone called you by your name in admiration, not just out of a role or an expectation? And let's just do something that might not necessarily be productive, but it makes you feel alive. So, what can we do about all this? It starts with giving ourselves and others permission to exist beyond utility, beyond what we can do, to matter, even when we're not being useful. At home, let's start people's using people's names more. Let's ask our parents about their dreams, not just their duties. Go ask your sibling, what genre of music are you listening to these days? What movie would you recommend I watch next? In schools, let's encourage kids to talk about who they are, not just the grades they get. Give them some space. Let's imagine, reflect, wonder. At work, let's remember our colleagues are also someone's friend, someone's parent, someone who may just paint on weekends. Let's not reduce them to a deliverable. And in our own minds, let's reflect. Let's journal. Talk about things that matter to us. Build a version of ourselves that doesn't disappear the moment a label does. Because we don't need to abandon our roles. We just need to remember we are more than them. So, here's a small invitation. Next time you meet someone, don't ask what they do, ask what they love. What brings them peace? What keeps them up at night? What gets them excited? What flavors their life? And when you look in that mirror, don't just see the student, the employee, the partner, see the whole person. That story that is still building, it's still unfolding, and there's so much more to go, because we are more than our usefulness, more than just boxes we can tick. We are more than the labels we've been given. And even if the world forgets to see that, we must never forget to see it ourselves. Let's begin there.